Folks, once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining for another session of Azure Power Lunch. As you know, we record these calls and we have already started recording. So if you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. And we place our recordings on our YouTube channel. So with that, let's go with our topic of discussion, which is around how to do uh, business continuity and disaster recovery for Azure Logic Apps. So um, here is before we go to the session, just want to give you a heads up. Next week is Microsoft Build conference. As you know, Build is Microsoft premier conference targeted towards the developer audience, and they're always going to be exciting session, new announcement, and it's free uh, virtually. So basically, if you go online and you can listen to the session, listen to on-demand session, all of the new announcements and things like that. So please, if uh, you're interested, go ahead and register and hear what's the latest stuff that's happening around app modernization and AI as we integrate into um, uh, application. Okay, so here's a quick agenda for our session. We are going to talk about what is meant by business continuity and disaster recovery for Logic App, what it means, what are different options, and then we will deep dive into the option. Demo is sprinkled all the way around. Please, sorry, please feel free to ask questions. And if uh, there are any audio issues, please feel free to I will make sure I hear. I correct that. So just wanna give this why I have this slide in red. The reason is I'm sure you already know about it. What DR HADR option you choose is gonna be driven by not the technology guidance, but the RTO and RPO requirements for your application, which comes from your SLA. That can be your application or a customer's application, whatever that it may be. One of your application may be critical, but based on its RPO and RTO, you may choose one approach to the other because cost will, um, uh, you know, play a factor. Complexity of the solution will play a factor, and you don't have to um, kind of over engineer solution if you can go with a simpler solution based on the RPO and RTO of your application. Got it? And as we go through this session, we will look and we will talk about different options. First of all, zone redundancy. Before we go into zone redundancy, let's talk about for a minute with Azure regions, zones, and data center. So if you don't know, just a quick refresher. Each Azure region is made of multiple zones. Think of a pizza pie. Pizza pie is a region. Each slice is a zone with a separate network and power provider. So if something happened to that provider, a zone may be down, entire region is still up. Okay, and then each data center is basically a topping on that pizza pie. So that's that. So what is meant by zone redundancy? That means that your application is uh, uh, running in multiple zones. So if one zone goes down, your application is still up. So, and by the way, you may or may not know, it is available automatically. If you are creating a new application in the consumption plan, it's available automatically. You don't have to do anything. If you create an application, a Logic app in the consumption plan, as soon as you create it, it is zone redundant. In the case of standard, you need to opt in. You have to, for choice of standard or zone redundant, you have to make a choice, and it has cost implications. Okay, so we will discuss it in a second as well. Second part is if you want to do active passive. This is when you are doing across zones, across regions. So let's say You have it in South Central, you did the zone redundancy, but God forbid something happened to that region, you still want your application to run. What do you do about it? Then basically you run it in another region, and that's the kind of this is cross region, so that's where you come with active active or active passive. Okay? Got it? So that's and by the way, it's not a built-in option. You have to do some engineering, solutioning around it, and that's how you go about it. And the third one is the active-active. In the case of active-active, basically you go in and you are running active-active in both region. Once again, that is available for both consumption plans and standard plans. I mean, you can do it because it's a solutioning and it's not a built-in option. Okay. So just a quick summary for zone redundancy first. In the case of zone redundancy, there are for consumption plan, there are no cost implications. It's enabled by default. You don't have to do anything. As soon as you create it, it's zone redundant. You know, that's it. For standard plan, you have to opt in at the deployment time. Just keep in mind, if you have an existing app at this moment, you cannot move it to a zone redundant. You have to basically create another zone redundant app and move the, basically uh, uh, create those applications there and go with that. Zone redundancy has cost implication. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly go into the demo mode and let's take a look. So what we're going to do, we are going to create a logic app and just see the experience, like how the experience is different. Um, so if we go into logic app and let's create a logic app, and we are going to demo, and okay, I just want to show it to you. So first of all, you have to be in a region where the logic apps are running. So let's go with consumption. As you can see, there is no option in consumption because it's already zone redundant. That's why there is no choice, because your application will be running on a zone redundant consumption plan. So just keep in mind, it is zone redundant. If we pick standard, yes, then you get the option. Do you want zone redundancy enabled or disabled? If you enable it, it will potentially triple your cost. So let's say if you plan to run your application on a single instance of a standard plan, now you have to run minimum of 3 instances. Okay, so that's thing that you have to keep in mind, that you will have to run on 3 instances. That's where this I said that it may triple the cost. So that just keep in mind, you don't have to change anything in your application, or but it will give you zone redundancy. One zone goes down, your application is still available. It's just like, think of it as an app service, or it's a web farm. You have multiple servers in a web farm, and one of the server that is strict goes down, then another server pops up. But in the case of the zone redundancy, you will have to have minimum of 3 server, basically each server in one zone. That's what it is. So that's kind of a simpler explanation. Any questions? So that's that. Let's go back to the slide deck, and let's talk about when we talk about cross region. Okay, so that's where things get a bit more interesting. As you know, that this is a um, integration mechanism, and this app by itself doesn't do much. It integrates stuff. So it may be integrating with a storage account, it may be event hub, database, message queue, or any number of services it may be connecting. Okay, and that's what I meant by connection. So let's say that you were running in East US, those services were in East US, and then you spin up an instance in West US2, and it's active, and but both instances are connecting to the same set of services that are running in East US. What happens if East US goes down? You will lose not only your East US logic app, you have lost the connections. Okay, so my point is you have to think about how you are going to work with those connections. Okay, how you gonna do you wanna make them redundant as well, or and that bring up some interesting things that you and that's where this whole RPO RTO discussion comes along. You know, like how and that's why you have to think uh, kind of more holistically on when designing a solution. It's just not that you copy the logic app on the other region. Yes, that's part of it. But what about other connections as well? And then there are other things as well, like on-premise data gateway. If you are using on-premise data gateway, if you are using integration accounts, all of these, you have to keep them in mind. Maybe you have to do the gateway in another region. Okay, that's that. So that bring us up to the first possible approach. This is active on-demand deployment, kind of active take on active passive, where you have a logic app and that's running in one region. And if that region suffers a loss, then what you do is you, uh, through your Azure DevOps, you detect the region is down, you deploy it in the other region, and it starts working in the other region after completing its deployment. Okay, I can tell you this. I have a very large customer which is using this technique because what they for a mission critical application. And the thing is that application is a kind of a runs on recurrence trigger, processes records every few hours. So what they have said, it can take some downtime, you know. So it can take some downtime. So what happens is very simply records comes in from different like from different FTP locations, and this application basically process them, connects to multiple systems. Long story short, it runs kind of a batch processing. Runs every few hours. So what they do is, in the case of a downtime, they they deploy this application into the other region, test it, run it, and what they have seen is in less than 1 hour, they can bring this application up and it starts processing the data. So based on their RPO, RTO, that is a good solution, but that is not a solution for every other application. That's why I just want to mention it. And we have talked about how to deploy logic apps with Azure DevOps in a previous session. So please take a look at that, how you can use Azure DevOps to deploy logic apps, and you can set up CI/CD. Okay. Then we come to active um, deployment, and that's where we're going to look at some of the caveats of active deployment, some regarding some of the triggers. Okay, so let's say that you have an application that always have to take load, and that is true if you are using a request trigger. As you know, in a logic app, you have to have a trigger. Recurrence runs every few minutes or a certain time. Service bus, for example, when a message arrives in service bus, request trigger when an HTTP request arrives. So if an HTTP request arrives, you have a mission critical application, your primary site is down, and you have to have running 24 by 7. You have to have another site. That's the secondary location always running. Okay, so if we look back, I mean, if you take a step back, yes, it's easy. You set it up in both location. You put a load balancer like Azure Front Door in front if it's a public logic app, and that's how you drive traffic between these two locations. Okay, so that's for active active. Um, but there is an interesting thing that you have to remember. You have to use some sort of a proxy or Azure API management between those locations because, and let me explain what I'm talking about. So, first of all, this is my Logic app. I'm going to duplicate this tab. Give me 1 second. I want to show you side by side. So I hope it is clear. So this is the Logic app. So in order to load balance, your URI path has to be the same. You know, so you call one side, it may be a different FQDN, but the URI path has to be the same. Because if the URI path is different, how the caller will know which URI path to call. Yes. So look at this. I have these two applications. One is in the South Central region, and one is in the Western Europe region. Okay. And if I go into the workflows, in order to call this workflow, I have to have this URL. And what I have done is I have copied these URLs here. If you can see, let me just zoom. Hopefully everybody can see it. You know, the URL is pretty much the same, but look at the last part, the signature piece. It's different. So if you call it with the signature piece, one or the other, every logic app is different, and there is no way to disable it. If you call it the wrong signature, you will get an authorization denied reason. Okay, this is something that you need to keep in mind because if that's why you will have to use a proxy of some sort in the middle or API management because what API management will do, it will abstract out this um, this signature, and you will get uniform URI path on both sides. I hope everybody gets it. Any questions? Okay. So for example, I have two examples here. One is using Azure API management. So for example, here, if I go into this resource group, I have API management instance, this one, SC. And if I go into this API management instance, I have some APIs, and then I have this, 1 second, let it takes its sweet time to load up. And since it's a demo, it will be, give it a second. If we just refresh the screen, hopefully. Yeah, okay. So you see, this is the Logic App demo, and this is the same function I am calling through Logic App. And if I go in here and let's look at the policies. 1 second. Yes. So I have two policy here. One is the check header, and then if I go in here in this function, let me, sorry guys, for some reason, yes. So if I go into this, come on, is going on here? One second, guys. I think I'm having some. Okay, let me go to the second APIM. Second, let's go to home and let's go to the second API management service. I wanted to show you the policy I have to translate, to remove. Basically, I call it to the same URI, but behind the scene, it is this is Logic App Demo, and this is the yes. So this is the rewrite URI function. I'm not sure why it wasn't working over there, but look at that. If I do the rewrite URI, I am sending this URI in here. So I'm setting it this way. You see, that's the that's the thing I am doing. So basically, you have to have a proxy to do that. You can use a function as well. You can have a .NET or Node.js, whatever function you want, and that function can do the translation. So basically, it has a function has a URL, and then it basically sends the actually calls the actual uh, and you have to have that function in each region. So basically, just like that, let me show you here. I have a function example as well. So if I go in here, um, this is a function app, and as you can see, this function app is calling. Yes, so give it 1 second. So this function app is calling the backend function. You're not going to see the code because it is a .NET function, and I am loading it, pushing it from the Visual Studio Code. But the point is, this is being called from, by this function, and it so you have the uniform URI path on both sides. That's something you have to keep in mind. This is only true for request triggers. Okay. For other type of triggers, that doesn't matter. Okay. So let's. I just want to bring this up. Any questions? Okay. And then, so this is for active deployment. And just keep in mind that you will have to have you may have service bus. It's reading from the service bus, or in the case of there's another uh, active passive deployment. In that case, you may have a mechanism, maybe another logic app that is kind of listening to the first site. As soon as the first site is disabled, it activates the second site. And in the second site, you may not have um, you may have scaled down, so it may scale up the second side for so that it can take the load and then start sending all the traffic uh, to the secondary site. So that you can do. And here are some of the kind of a description of those scenarios that we discussed. Um, and just keep in mind, you don't have to go with one of the other. You can use a combination. You may have application parts of those logic apps may be using active-active, part of those may be using active-passive. So if there are request trigger involved and a lot of traffic is coming, that may be active-active. If there are, based on your RPO, RTO, if there are things that, that can wait a few hours or some time, then you may be using active-passive, things like that. So that, once again, your RPO and RTO drive this. This just tells you how, your end result may look like, you know. Um, so that's all I wanted to cover today because, this question has come up with a few customers. So I just want to bring it up just to share with the audience here. So with that, I just want to do a quick recap. As we talked in the beginning, there are multiple ways that we can do HADR for your Logic apps. As for any app, that's true for Logic apps as well. HADR option will be driven by your RPO and RTO and your app SLA. There are multiple options, for example, in terms of zone redundancy for consumption and for standard apps, there is zone redundancy option for consumption. It's by default. For standard, you have to opt in and it has cost implications. And then you come with the other solution for cross region. In that case, you have active, 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 passive, or active, passive with on demand, things like that. They uh, all those solutions, once again, are driven by your RPO, RTO. Just keep in mind we talked about a caveat for request, for cross region. If you are doing active active with a request trigger, you have to have a way, use a proxy or API management to make sure you can abstract out the signature because each logic app has a different signature, and that is in the query string. And you cannot uh, kind of remove those signature or disable those. So that's why you will have to use a proxy to kind of abstract those signature out so that URI on both sides, URI path on both sides is uniform so you can do a load balancing. This is only true for request trigger. And by the way, this is true for active, 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 passive, or any scenario. So with that, I know we have 1 minute. Any questions? Okay, folks, if there are no questions, I will give everybody their 1 minute back. Thank you for joining and hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.